What the fuck was that? How did we build up for 8 years and get to this point? You do not build up a plot line for that long and then not deliver on it at all. From the very first scene of this entire series, we were introduced to the White Walkers, and now they're just being swept away as if there's just some minor side quest. Not so much a minor side quest, that's part of why it's so bad, is, part of the reason, the fact that it was built up as so important for so long actually makes it less interesting because it's just swept aside. Just like alright, well, we're done with that. The main quest is Cersei. It barely even feels like they lost anything. We only lost a couple side characters, and none of them surprising whatsoever. Did anyone think that Theon had a role to play in the endgame? Did anyone think that Jorah was going to survive to the end? Did anyone think that Ed was going to live? No. If they wanted to subvert our expectations, they would have let Ed live and Sam die. Wouldn't it have been great to see Ed and Jon talk about their friend who had fallen? And let's just go into the Night's Watch here. They were the main force that has been against the White Walkers for thousands of years, and not a single Night's Watch member had basically any role to play, any significant role in this battle, nor any role in confronting any of the White Walkers or the Night King in this final battle. They have been fighting this war the entire time, and it's just taken away from them, not just by Arya, but just by the writing of this whole episode. So, Jon was on his dragon, or on Dany's dragon, right? That's about all he contributed to this entire battle. He did basically nothing. She can control 3 dragons from the back of 1 dragon. She doesn't need a second dragon rider. And he totally failed in the battle against the undead dragon. He was getting his shit wrecked. I have no problem with Arya being the killer of the Night King. Thematically, death is a part of her story. However, Arya's arc is built around people who have personally wronged her. Now, she has no personal relationship. She has never even seen a White Walker. She has no relationship whatsoever with the dead, with the army of the dead, with the White Walkers, and with the Night King. Guess who does? Jon Snow. And look at this guy's eyes. He's devoid of all intelligence. This guy's just fucking bored. Arya had no relationship with the Night King. Jon has lost friends to and met the Night King before, and he has been personally fighting this war for a long time on the side of a faction who is set up with the sole purpose of keeping these White Walkers out. And they have no role whatsoever in this battle. I don't even know if any of them are left alive outside of Ed, Sam, and Jon, and now Ed's dead. It would have been... I love Sam. He is literally one of my favorite characters. Sam the Slayer. I can't overstate how much I love Sam, and how much of the heart and soul he is of the Night's Watch, and even of the show. He almost represents the average person, or at least the average geek, who's going to be afraid of actual battle, and who likes lore and stuff like that. But I think he should have died here. That would have been an ending befitting for Sam. I would have actually been sad by one of the deaths here. Ed, I like Ed. He's funny, but he's a side character more so than Sam. Sam's kind of, if he's not top tier, he's second tier main character. That really would have just driven home the feeling of loss and desperation here. But again, like, are there even any other Black or Night's Watchmen? I have no idea. It seems like the writers here are literally losing the plot. From the very beginning, I don't get what the showrunners don't understand about this story. Who sits on the Iron Throne has never mattered, even the slightest bit. It was always petty and pointless, especially in the face of this supernatural existential threat. How the showrunners never figured this out or understood this is pretty much proof positive that we're living in clown world now. I just don't get it. Why don't they get this? The entire point of this series is that there are bigger things, aka death, than the pointless squabbles between petty lords. Why is Cersei all of a sudden more important? 'Cause the show is called Game of Thrones, not Ice and Fire. Yeah, well, it's based on the Song of Ice and Fire. Only the first book was called The Game of Thrones, because the setup is this petty little game that everyone's playing, this political game. Meanwhile, there's this huge, unimaginable, like out of this world threat, and that's treated as the side quest in the show. Why would you have any supernatural elements? Why would you have prophecy? Why would you have dragons? Why would you have magic? Why would you have supernatural creatures in any capacity if the point of the show is the political machinations? Because these guys don't get it. The point of the show is that the political machinations, the Machiavellianism, though interesting, is ultimately pointless. The point, what we were driving towards, was all these people with these deep-seated conflicts, these absolutely just at odds with each other. Those people are going to have to team up against the single biggest threat. But what we had was the single biggest threat just defeated in one episode. In one swing of one blade. There was no metaphorical or poetic. The characters didn't learn anything. They didn't have to lose anything. They lost some red shirts. That's about it. And Jorah, who everyone expected to die for Dany. This episode wasn't all bad. I really enjoyed most of it, but the fact that the ending went nowhere is just unforgivable. I could forgive the bad tactics. I could forgive just the stupid decisions made in this battle for the visual splendor of it. I could even forgive the almost unwatchable blackness at some times, but I could not forgive the lack of creativity involved in the ending. This is like The Last Jedi. Is they set up this stuff so that we expect an answer, and then they go, it's nothing. Aren't you surprised? They've literally lost the plot. I don't know what else to say. I don't think that this could have ever ended. Like, even if Jon... I'm not upset that Arya killed him. Even if Jon killed him, it would have been almost the same. It just would have been slightly more fulfilling, because Jon has this personal relationship with him. I mean, this would be like Chewbacca killing Darth Vader in the beginning of Return of the Jedi, and then Jabba being the final boss. It's just ridiculous. And I love Chewbacca. I love Arya. But this... why didn't... See, if he had to cut down multiple characters, multiple heroes, to get to Bran, they all stood in his way and they went down one by one, just like Theon, that would have felt impactful. That would have felt like a true loss. And then if Arya did the killing blow, at least if Jon got to fight him, maybe he cuts Jon's frickin' arm off or something. I don't know. But Jaime, Brienne, Jon, they all had Valyrian steel swords. They all could have killed this. I mean, Jon didn't even get a Dragon Slayer moment. You take away the Night King, you don't even give him a moment. All he does is run away from fire, which, by the way, blew up walls, but now it's barely even singeing his oil-soaked locks. They could have given him a moment to at least fight the dragon. They didn't give these characters any heroic moments except for Arya. And like Theon, sort of. He didn't even get one shot in to the Night King. And then he died immediately from a gut wound, which you can keep fighting through. Meanwhile, Jorah and Beric get like several gut wounds and chest wounds and back wounds, and they're still able to fight. It's just contrived plot, bad writing, just awful. You can tell these guys are adapters, not writers. But they're so convinced that they're clever because all they can do is shock value. So the way this should have ended is they needed to make a pact with the White Walkers because they represent death, and you can't get rid of death. This is a natural cycle. The Long Night has occurred before. There are hints that it wasn't a military victory, that something more was going on, like the Wall. Why have any of these fantasy elements if you're just going to wipe them out and say, like, well, you know, a shitty queen is the final battle. In a way, like, I know how bad these guys are at writing from previous seasons that they don't have a George in, but in a way, I feel like this is so bad that they're trying to pull a red herring on us, and they will bring back the Night King, I hope. Somehow. But I am not hopeful based on how they've butchered a lot of the plot lines already. We could have had something really interesting. Character conflict that worked, forcing people who hate each other onto the same side. Instead, we get bad guy dies, and now Cersei bad guy. She gonna die. Because what is Cersei gonna win? No. If the manifestation of death cannot win, we're not gonna have an ending with Cersei killing all our main characters. And all of these near-death moments where they're surrounded, absolutely swamped with dead, and it just cuts away and it cuts back and the dead are sparse again. It's just stupid, terrible writing, terrible directing. It seems like they just shot a bunch of action shots and then cut it all together in this. And I really like scenes like this. They could have figured out a way to make it make a little more sense. But they're just thinking about visuals. That's visuals and shock value. Shock value for the sake of shock value. And just cheap shock value. This is exactly what George R. R. Martin was writing this story to avoid, is all the good guys on one side versus all the bad guys on one side, and just an empty bad guy. They don't reveal any sort of motivation for this guy. They say he wants to erase the memory of man. Why? That's like just saying, you know, Thanos, he just wants to wipe out half the universe. And that's his character development. The reason Infinity War was so good is because we understood why he was doing the things he was doing. Not what he was doing, but why. And you've built this question up of why for so long in the context of, well, there are no truly all good or all evil people. Even like the forces of darkness have their reasons. But no, just stab him at the pointy end. And another trope with Game of Thrones is paper armor when convenient. Like in season 1, you can see Jorah's armor working correctly against the Dothraki. But apparently an undead wight can just stab right through it, and apparently he can just survive it. But then other characters with armor, like Jon literally just stabs through a guy's helmet in like the Battle of Bastards and flicks his wrist and cuts him in half. As if it's like a lightsaber. How incompetent can you be to ignore the entire point of the series if you're so arrogant and egomaniacal that you have no respect for someone else's intellectual property, that you'll butcher their characters, pat yourself on the back for your regressive innovations to basic fantasy tropes? It's just a teasing a trope and then saying, nope, which is now a trope of its own called getting Johnsoned, named after, of course, Roundhead Ryan Johnson. So, it's just, it makes no sense now. It's just shock value for the sake of shock value. I guess that's about it. There's not much more to say here. Arya is fine, but there's just no payoff. The fact that there needed to be a pact between Death, because you can't just kill Death. And life is about accepting the reality of death and doing what you can and moving on. And it might not take you today, but you can't just get rid of it. That's why a pact with the undead was so necessary in all these theories. But no, it's reverted back to classic tropes of just good versus bad guy. Oh, we killed bad guy, now we go kill bad queen. It's so uncreative and such a disservice to the entire point of this show, which is that the Game of Thrones is petty and pointless. I'm not sure what else to say other than I don't know. I feel like imagine if the Night King could fight all the main characters, and he cuts them down one by one. Everyone gets a shot at him. Maybe some of them are wounded. But how does Arya just teleport through ranks and ranks of undead and just show up next to him? Like, they're literally looking at the Night King in his direction of where Arya's coming from. And the Night King was stupid too. He could have gotten shot with a dragon glass arrow or a freaking throwing dagger. Arya could have thrown her dagger at the Night King. That would have made so much more sense. But it's about all these thematic things. In a climax, the character pays off their direct arc. They have to overcome someone or something. Well, actually, it's not just someone. It is literally something within themselves or outside of themselves that's like metaphorical, beyond just, stabbing someone. No story has ever been satisfying that it ended like, oh, well, he's just a better swordsman. Star Wars is good not because Luke outfought Darth Vader, but because of the spiritual journey he went through to get there. Luke did not win because he was a better swordsman than Darth Vader. Luke won because he laid down his sword. And he was good with himself. He was spiritually complete. But apparently these writers just think, well, the way you win, the way your character becomes the person they're meant to be is they just stab him in the right place. Which, by the way, I forgot to kind of come back to this when I talked about armor. The Night King, if he was just wearing a normal breastplate, would have been completely invulnerable to Arya. At least, maybe he had a helmet. Maybe he could have a helmet or something. But, none of the characters in the show like to wear helmets. All the red shirts like to wear helmets. None of the main characters do. Even though you can easily put on a helmet that identifies someone, like the Hound's helmet, or just an open face helmet, or a helmet that pulls back that has an open face that you can pull down. I mean, we recognize some of these characters just by their armor. But no, the Night King walks in with the worst security service ever, where Arya can have off-screen teleportation powers, and he just walks in with no armor, right on the spot, with a gap in his armor right on the spot where the only spot where he can be killed. It's just, and Bran did nothing. What is his point now? He's gonna spy on Cersei or something. Great. All of this supernatural shit just falls flat if it's going to be used against Cersei, if it's not going to be used against the manifestation of death itself. All you're telling us is that, the god of death, not as big a threat as Cersei. So the reason people feel cheated is because this isn't a plot line. That there is no arc here. Even though this was obviously the main plot of the entire series from the very first scene with the conflict between the Night's Watch and the White Walkers, it's just a cheap plot device to get our main characters, who are all the good guys are on one side and all the bad guys are on the other side. Cheap bullshit George R.R. Martin wanted to avoid. The White Walkers were just a cheap plot device to get our good characters to have a slight disadvantage against mean ol' Cersei, instead of actually presenting us with something interesting, which is the same conflict, these same resentments, the same character of Cersei forced to ally with these people. Instead, they just go, no, Cersei, she's a better manipulator than Bran or the Night King. She just knows that somehow the army of the dead is gonna lose when none of the other characters did. Does she think that because she has Qyburn on her side that the dead won't affect her? It's just stupid. We could have had something great. They could redeem this by some connection with Qyburn, or the Night King warging into Bran, or even Gilly's baby. But this is pretty much just ruined, just like this man ruined Star Wars. Thank you, Ruin Johnson, for introducing the trope of nope. Alright, well, that's it for today. I guess we'll see how this season ends. Bye.